Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend D.G. Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes, or go to patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Hope to see you there.
This is D.G. Chichester, and you're listening to the Capes and Lunatics podcast.
That's right. It's been another month. Welcome back to another episode of the Chichester Chats. I am Phil. Joining me, as always, is Lilith. And, of course, the man who this would not be possible without, Mr. D.G. Chichester.
I'm sure we can find many people who would... impersonate me easily. Guys, thank you as always having me back. What was that interpretive dance opening? That was like I'm watching it and hearing nothing. Was that like
I mean, if you want to dance, that's fine.
Was it making noise on your side at least?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was telling Lilith before we get to the issues we're going to cover today, I wanted to show you something. I just discovered this last night. Some new merch you may be interested in.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Oh, the Funko, Funko. Is that what you're
talking? There it is. I was alerted to this by
oh, you got it! Nice.
There it is in real life. I was alerted to this. Did not even know this existed.
Neither did I till last night.
Dare DD on Twitter, who I've had a good chance to meet a couple of times at a couple of conventions. She posted that her shipment had been delayed. I was amazed that it even existed, and so she pointed me in the right direction. Target canceled my order and hers a couple of times. There was some shipping delay. They didn't have it in. It didn't arrive, and then finally was able to score. This very fluorescent black armor, which says, right inside, somewhere in this zone. Well, we can't quite get it focused, but fall from grace. It's like it's the whole kit and caboodle there. So I think it's finally we have to finally acknowledge that it's made it.
It's got a Funko Pop. It's made
There's
it.
a Funko Pop.
I mean, look, they picked it because it seems like they're doing like different eras of Daredevil. But that's
the haters have finally been quashed and totally driven down. So their derision no longer matters. You get a mini series and a Funko Pop within the course of 1 year that says something.
Yeah, you need a black light. I think it said it glows in the black light.
It does. I mean, the colors are like a little weird, but then I realized there's a whole series of them that way, and I found this one buried behind a bunch of other ones at Target. So
somebody probably hit it. Was going to come back for it.
Yeah. So I got to contribute to some lovely disappointment. They came back and they're searching and scrambling and wailing in the aisles.
So kids, when you see Mr. Chichester,
you'll never want to retail, grab it.
Exactly. When you see him yelling at some 12-year-old, I created this.
Exactly. It's the Seinfeld Festivus thing. As I was beating the small, the woman,
when I was reading blows down on.
Exactly. And we've all been there. It did remind me of, I used to go to. This is no longer exists, but KB Toys was like one of those mall toy stores that I could remember making way too many pilgrimages to, as an adult, to say, what's new? What action figure thing do I need? And I hadn't really done that in forever. So to kind of go back to the Target thing and wander the aisles looking for it was pretty funny. And there's weird toys out these days. There's all these these mini brand toys that now exist. Like a little mini bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, a little mini, set of Nike sneakers. Like they're called like mini brands or something, as if you're going to be so in love. Yeah, but like you're so in love with a brand that I want, a mini McDonald's hamburger or something. But
I think it's for a lot of people that I see, at least on Instagram, they're like doll photographer, things like that hyper real.
Oh, maybe, yeah, okay. That's that makes sense, sort of.
It's super popular. It's like
They're super
blind
popular.
boxing and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of an example.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah,
I'm
behind the curve. I got to go get that Daredevil. Pop
it's
today.
Hey,
it's
can you
really
pick up 2? I'll cash app you just in case I can't make it to Target today.
Okay. Yes. Oh yeah, you are coming up here in a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they have 2, yeah, I'll grab 2. All right. So yes, well, the reason we are here this week though is to talk something new. I just recently read this, so we are talking Dr. Zero 1 and 2.
there they are in
Yes.
2 killer covers.
Yes.
Mr. Sienkiewicz and Mr. Chiarello. I believe that's Mark's cover, I think. Yeah, this when we see the Dr. Zero toy figures, then we'll really know we've gone into deep cut territory. Although he certainly deserves one.
Yeah.
So give me the pitch that Archie pitched to you guys about the Shadowline and specifically.
This I can do. So other aspects as we dig into the book, the caveat I was going to give is because of this travel this week, I wasn't able to dig into my issues as deeply as I wanted. So I'm going to depend on you guys for specific questions. Be a little bit more specific. And tell me about a scene or a panel or a line that you want to talk about because I need my memory triggered. I know the general gist of the issues.
I was going to say, don't worry, we're going to get back to these, or I'm going to cover all these issues eventually. So,
well, at least issue 7 because didn't write issue 7.
Well, yeah, no, I read them all.
Okay.
The Howard came in on the end. I asked Howard to come in, Howard Mackey. So Epic as a line benefited from an amazing range of talent and an amazing range of creative ideas. Right, we had the pick of the top of comics creative talent wanted to work with Archie Goodwin as I think an editorial group. Epic had demonstrated that they would take care of creators. They would work to make sure that their artwork and their stories are represented in the highest possible print ways that we could. And we did, and I can hold up pretty much any Epic comic with a lot of pride and, show off things we did. And what the creators did. But the problem with it was so eclectic. Right? There was no really unifying vision to Epic as there was to Vertigo, say. Epic was just whatever was really cool to a creator, we'd make happen. So you would jump from, the absolute ridiculous insanity of Gru the Wanderer to the tone poem of Moonshadow to the super mature Screw You the Boys of Martial Law, to, you had this whole range, right? It's Stray Toasters and Bill Sienkiewicz working out, his psychological issues, but thinking through deep, strange abstract concepts. You're all over the place. So there was no unifying vision that sort of allowed somebody to kind of glom onto what Epic represented, or a starting point for Epic. And so it was the day of the universes, right? Everyone was doing a universe. Marvel, I think, had just done or was about to do the new universe. Malibu was doing a universe. Valiant had a universe. Archie Goodwin, who was our lead, our editor-in-chief of Epic Comics, my boss, had the idea that if Epic had its own universe, that could be a starting point. It could be something that would be a little bit more of a regular anchor point for Epic. And by doing so, people might kind of be interested in these more quote-unquote traditional superheroes. And the more traditional superheroes would be a starting point for people who might never touch a Moonshadow or a Martial Law or a Gru for that matter. So by getting them in on the more easy way, it's classic drug pusher, operational mentality, we would then interest them in something else because since they were Epic books, they would have Epic ads inside them and we'd be, promoting all these other titles. So that was the strategic idea. One of the great things about working with Archie, was there was a strategic intention behind it as well as a creative intention. So Archie went off and he created that entire world. He conceived of the idea that there were these, I'm not going to call them mutants, but yes, mutantish characters called the Shadows who had existed for ever and a day in the shadow of humanity. And that they had these varying levels of abilities, but always keeping, to the edge of civilization and society, and were the the cause of many legends and such, that you would hear about, where the gods and such would be because of these shadows. I wish I still had the original proposal document. I think it probably got lost in amongst the many other things. And in the course of that background, he also then created the conceits for Dr. Zero, St. George, and Powerline. So those were going to be the 3 books. And he had put this out there, and publishing had agreed this was a great idea. And then we were waiting. Okay, so who's going to be the creative team? Like, this was all Archie driven. We knew we would be working on them as editors. Myself, I was one of the editors. Margaret Clark was the other editor. Steve Buccellato was our shared assistant editor. We had an intern or floating intern that came through the department. At one point, that floating intern was Marie Javins, who now does something, I think, in comics,
Wow.
like run DC Comics. And then, frankly, out of the blue, and for reasons I never really understood and didn't corner him and really ask, Archie came to me and Margaret one day, and we thought he was going to say, okay, you're going to edit this one, you're going to edit this one, so-and-so is going to work on it, or we're talking to so-and-so. And instead he asked us if we wanted to be the co-writers, not just on one, but on all 3. So on one hand, maybe Archie was giving up and just wanted to, get the books moving. And on another hand, maybe he thought because we worked for him, it would be easier to guide and control them. But there's also an idea that we were totally flabbergasted, that he would ask us, who had relatively few credits to our name, to take on something so big, even though it was not going to be at the profile of, the relaunch of the DC universe. It was still a pretty big deal, and there was going to start to be some pretty big talent associated with it. Klaus Janson would end up illustrating St. George. Dennis Cowan and Bill Sienkiewicz would end up doing Dr. Zero. Dave Ross, who sort of we treated a bit poorly, I say with embarrassment, but was still a very competent artist, would be assigned Powerline. So he came to us and he said, would you guys want to do this? And we always thought one of the reasons, a good reason, not the self-deprecating reason, was that we had done an issue of Justice, Margaret and I. Justice was the title that Archie had created for the new universe. That was the concept he had created. And very quickly, as those books were launched and they fell under both sales issues and sort of internal issues, a lot of the editors didn't care for the books. There was a sort of an almost like, let's just get these things out and get rid of them. There was a lot of pressure from Jim Shooter on how they should or should not be done. But one of the things that suffered was Justice quickly went from Archie's original concept to some weird, I don't remember what it was, weird multidimensional magic-y sort of thing that was really far afield of what his original proposal had been. Well, we had a chance to write one fill-in issue for Justice. That's how Margaret and I had started writing together, is we would be pitching, ourselves to editors. We'll write an inventory or a fill-in issue, something that might never run, but here's a story that an editor could get done, put in the drawer. When the regular team missed a deadline, the editor could stay on schedule by pulling out that inventory issue. And so we had written one issue of Justice that we went back to Archie's original proposal, and we drew what we felt were the primary ideas, not trying to impress Archie, but just because we thought it was like, well, this is what the idea really is. And we tried to invest that into the storyline. And he never really, he didn't comment about it at some point, say, oh, thanks for doing thanks for honoring what I was trying to do or whatever. I was, it was very easy to get along with Archie. But I admit, I was also somewhat intimidated by him, for no good reason except for who I was at that point in time. So the questions I should have asked, I did not ask at that time. But we, between myself and Margaret, sort of would think that might have been one of the reasons he turned to us, is because we seemed to kind of be aligned with what he was doing, and that we would pick up on those right pieces by doing these books. So all of a sudden, we didn't just have one regular assignment; we had 3, and then it was kind of off to the races to try to make it happen, which also pushed poor Steve Buccellato into a position of, because we couldn't edit ourselves technically, so we needed an editor, and the only other editorial person in the office, in the department rather, was either Archie, who had to be Archie, right? He had to play up at his higher editor-in-chief level, or Steve Buccellato, who both was an assistant editor and was our assistant editor.
And he did all 3, right? He edited all 3 lines, right?
Yeah, and he had to, now try to control our egos and rein us in, at the same time being technically answerable to us in the real regular hierarchy of things. But Steve, I think, rose to the occasion and did a lot of really smart things. Not chief among them, but certainly one of the coolest things, I think, was he came up with the idea, I'm pretty sure, of that triptych cover approach, that every issue number would always be done by the same artist. So, Bill Sienkiewicz did all the covers for 1, and I think Mark Chiarella did all the issues for 2, and Kevin O'Neill did all the issues for 5, and that sort of thing. So you had a sort of a consistent look as each book came out.
So you were saying, like, there was such a different mix of epic books that do you think the strategy was Archie was just like, okay, you and Margaret will write all 3 of these books, so that way they'll have the same flavor, they'll have the same synergy and everything. And you said you didn't have a lot of credits to your name at that point. Do you think that was also a strategy where it's just like, well, yeah, we want these to be different than like the Marvel, your classic Marvel lines. I'm not going to throw a guy on here who's been writing for Marvel for 20 years,
Right.
So for a fresh take, yeah. So synergy and fresh take. So that was the whole strategy.
I don't know, Phil. I wish I had again asked him,
Yeah.
Specifically, and just sort of cornered him and saying, at the one point we didn't want to like upset the rhythm of the universe. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he didn't mean to ask us, and if we brought it up, he'd say, "Oh, did I just offer that to you? Like I, I thought you two were somebody else."
Why me?
And so we didn't want to like rock the boat. It was sort of like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do them. Yeah, that's fine. We'll take these assignments." And because this was a big deal. This was like, 3 books. It was income. That was profile. But I think I would think the first part certainly had some synergistic strategic value. That idea that, one person, one team, by doing all 3, could coordinate better and could bring, different identities, but a similar flavor to it. That makes a lot of sense. The unknown aspect, not so much, in the sense that I think we were doing good work, but it wasn't like we were doing, I would say, so much breakout work that people were saying, "Oh, who's this, Grant Morrison guy? We want to work with him. He's doing completely outrageous stuff." And sales-wise, strategically, you would want to get somebody with more name value, right? You would want to try to push these books, up the chain as fast as possible, and you'd get more, just being practical and honest, you'd get more out of it if you had somebody with more name value than we did at that time.
You would need those weaponized pharmaceuticals to be Grant Morrison, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the gimmick cover. It's like, is this a scratch and sniff? Is this a tab? What's going on? I don't know. It's like, lick the cover, kids. So I again, not really knowing why we were sort of deep into it right from the moment, and then trying to kind of raise our game and honor what he had put down on paper and his proposal, and doing everything we can to bring these this world and these characters to life.
I mean, the ad, you were talking about the ads. The ads worked. I saw the ad for Powerline. I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have to do this someday. Because I mean, I found Dr. Zero on eBay. It wasn't that.
I personally like St. George. That's my favorite.
And we're gonna do that. We're gonna do St. George too, because especially Shrek shows up in Dr. Zero eventually. I was just like, oh man, this Shrek guy, man, he seems like quite the terror.
Bum. Thank you very much, kids. And yeah, I mean, they did a fair job of promotion. I can't fault the promotion department. I always argue with Fabian about the line. You know, there's the giant poster they did, which had the trio of Bill Sienkiewicz covers, and you know, the line was, our world is their world. You know, they want it back. And I said, if it's their world, then why do they want it back? So it's like, and you know, we would have these type of arguments, and to this day, I'm sure he would still insist he was right. But you know.
So do you remember which book like you worked on first? Because like technically, Dr. Zero's like this character out of the trio,
right?
So do you remember what order you worked in?
I mean, they all came out at the same time. I
Right.
think they all came out like whatever week they came out in. You know, they weren't like, it wasn't like, was that the case? I'm pretty sure it was.
I'm just mean like, so you just did them all at once, like?
Yeah, I mean, it was, but I'm trying to remember if like the pacing of the release was, you know, was Dr. Zero in week 1 of the month, was St. George in week 2, was Powerline in week 3, or would they all come out together in week 2? I think they all came out together because that was the idea, you know, that maybe retailers would put all 3 covers together and it would have that feeling. But I think linearly, they were all in the same schedule. So certainly that was, if that's the case, you know, we had to kind of work on them together, but I think we would usually.
How much lead time do you remember? How much lead time? Like, was it like a lot of scrambling? Because it's like 3 books in the same shared unit. It's like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Oh, they're due tomorrow, but it was because the artists also needed time, right? So the artists were going to get at least 3 to 4 weeks, you know, to illustrate. And I'm pretty sure Dennis had been assigned, and I think Klaus had been assigned, or you know, or been offered and had accepted. And Archie had found or had chosen Dave Ross. Yeah, so Archie definitely, you know, drove the you know, the art end and the art decisions. And that was, again, the secret weapon of Archie Goodwin was everybody wanted to work with Archie Goodwin. You know, if Archie called you and said, I have something I'd like you to work on, it was the rare person who would say, no, not so much. So, but I would say, you know, I'm going to guess we had between 4 weeks at least to, you know, start kind of getting going on this. So we went into it pretty intensely as much as we could to try to bang out, you know, those stories and get those things moving.
And would you say, I mean, this is all fresh to me, so, well, is Dr. Zero one of the original anti-heroes? Because again, I mean, he does
the ambiguity.
Oh, well, I mean, he does save the day, but it's more like along the lines of, yeah, I don't want these idiots to blow up the planet because I have to live on this planet.
Yeah, Zero's really interesting, you know, and I don't know that we were, you know, I think we grew as writers very rapidly, you know, from the weight of the books. The first issue of each, I think, is a bit messy because we were being influenced by the things that we admired around us, right? You know, this Neil Gaiman guy, this Alan Moore guy, this Frank Miller guy, you know, and these sort of internal monologues and this sort of slightly, different, more mature, you know, way of storytelling and writing. And Zero, especially, I think, suffers from that in the first issue, but they all do a little bit. And by that, I mean that we're trying to use internal monologues and we're not doing the clearest amount of setup that we could have done. It's all there, but number 2 is where each of them I felt really clicked. And in some ways, I wish number 2 was number 1 on all of them, you know, because they're stronger. And I think they really do get stronger, you know, moving on as they go along. And I stand behind, like when we got to Critical Mass, the big maxi series or whatever, as just like, it's a really good story. I would have even said that before you guys got me out of my, you know, my shell here with this program. But Zero is really interesting in the, I don't know what he is in the sense of, like, he's not the anti-hero, even in the sense of, like, I'm just a rough guy, and every now and again I get pulled into a terrible situation. I got to rise to the occasion to help people out. Like, that's kind of your classic definition of an anti-hero, right? Or I do something so violent in order to like correct the situation that I'm acting in a non-heroic way, but achieving heroic goals. Zero is just a total manipulator. Like, that's what he is. He's a manipulator for himself. He's a manipulator really for himself, right? It's this zero-centric universe that he lives in, and everything, then becomes a matter of manipulation. And that's where you get in that first issue, you get all the things he's setting up. He's going to the fashion places, and he's going to he's manufacturing the events so he can manipulate perception around what he is. It's a little too fragmented in the way he's doing it, as opposed to sort of being a little more direct, and maybe the narration to sort of really be clear about what he's doing. It's all there, but it's like one caption is missing, for each scene to kind of make it really clear. But so I don't know, like, I wouldn't put him down as an anti-hero. I sort of put him down as this incredibly like self-absorbed, character. And he doesn't even ever really rise to the occasion of I've come to a new conclusion about things. He sort of stays fairly consistent in that. He protects the people around him that he's interested in. The Sheila Willis character is sort of like his love interest, and some of the human characters or shadow characters we find that he's had long relationships with, who he sort of respects in a grudging way, if you will. But if they're crossed, they become his mission, as it will. But his attack on a villain or a situation is not necessarily driven by a higher good. It's driven by, if I allow that shadow to release, this destructive virus upon the world, that's going to have this domino effect, right? And it's going to have a repercussion which is not advantageous to me. So there's that grand manipulator. He's in a lot of ways, he's more like a Ra's al Ghul, sort of character, to put an equivalent out there, comic equivalent, I think, in a lot of ways.
Well, he actually so old, and
yeah,
I mean, that hooked me right from the beginning. Is most superhero comics, it's like, oh, they're putting the suit together and then they're going to go out and do good, which he does. But but for Zero, it's more like, oh yeah, I know people will trust this, especially once I start like rescuing people, and
right.
even from stuff maybe I set up. But they'll trust the costume, and it's just that old archetype of the Superman.
The ominous last lines of issue 1. Humanity's had its chance. Now it's my turn. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well then.
Yeah. There's some really good. You've always sort of been very gracious, Lilith, and like sort of tagging me in a good way for having some good turns of phrase and lines. And there's a lot of good proto stuff in Zero. All of them really sort of kick in really early on.
So Zero was like a training ground for a lot of things maybe that came later. Do you think?
Oh, I think all of them were.
Yeah.
I mean, even Powerline, which again we sort of
get to that,
treated shabbily, because I always like to think I was a relatively fair person, but I know I wasn't as much as I would like to have been. But we, and by that I mean me, and I'm going to speak for Margaret a little bit, and maybe even Steve, and they're welcome to refute it. But we sort of looked like, oh my God, we got Dennis Cowan and Bill Sienkiewicz here. Oh my God, we got Klaus Janson over here, and who's this Dave Ross guy? Like we didn't give Dave the credit that he sort of deserved, and so we always sort of treated like Powerline as like the afterthought in a way. Not that we didn't like the characters, it was sort of like we weren't crazy about the execution. But I think ultimately they all became a good training ground for having to see bigger situations, for interconnecting all these characters, for creating a ton of characters, beyond what Archie had set up. The Dirk Ravenscore, the Ravenscore family, which was sort of like the big Shadowline crime family that comes into operation. That was part of Archie's idea, like that there was, this group, but we would bring them to life. We would bring, to life the supporting cast of Humans and Shrek and so forth. None of those were part of the original piece. So that interconnectivity, the different character tones, Zero was the great manipulator. So imperious and above it all and condescending, Powerline, you had to play off the kids and the naivete, and Devlin, Michael Devlin St. George, would become the tortured, proto Daredevil type for me. He's got a proto Matt Murdock aspect. And, I threw a couple of, I think, St. George references into Daredevil at one point or another. I'm pretty sure that Terror at one point says something like, I knew a guy with a St. George complex at one point. So, to Murdoch, so.
Do you think? As I was reading the whole Dr. Zero, I basically read Dr. Zero the eight issues in one sitting.
Okay,
I was so into this because it just got to me. I was down. I was like, man, we're good. I'm like, you brought Shrek over as Terror. I'm like, man, where can we ever get like a Dr. Zero in the regular Marvel line? Do you think? I don't know. Do you think the Epic line was maybe just a victim of bad timing, just because the new universe was what, 85, 86? And do you think maybe people were just like, oh, they're starting another universe or something?
Yeah, absolutely. everybody was doing a universe, so that's what we were doing too.
But it was like Marvel's doing another new universe. It's
right, but also like I said, there was a Malibu universe, there was a Dark Horse universe. Dark Horse Presents. There was the Valiant universe. Every comic company was jumping on the universe bandwagon, and you got to get universe burnout at some point. And did it suffer from that? Absolutely. Maybe it suffered from us. Maybe, like I said, I think the first issues are a little muddy. I think it really kills after that. I remember Howard, when I asked him to come in on the last issues, he wasn't familiar with them at all, because the Marvel editors especially, and I was friends with Howard, and am friends with Howard. But, they didn't give two shits about anything that didn't say Marvel on it. Like, what do you guys do over there in Epic? So it wasn't, and anything we didn't matter that at the point, like, by the time I had finished all the Shadowline stuff, right? That's 8 issues of each, that's plus another 8-9 issues of Critical Mass, that's 40, 50 comics, I'm bad at math, but 40-ish comics or whatever. I had my credits. Didn't matter at all. Like, you're a new writer as far as we're concerned. So, but I remember Howard read the books, when I asked him to do that last issue. And he was like, wow, these are really good. So it's not for a lack of that there's good stuff there. It's you just don't get the awareness, or maybe it's the saturation, or maybe again, people didn't know who we were, and therefore.
Yeah, a lot of people slept on Epic back in the day. Not me though. Like I said, I kind of like the creator focus. Like it just makes a difference. Like you can just kind of tell.
It just flew over my head.
Those books.
It just flew over my head too, because I was still at the newsstand and the spinner rack at this point, and I saw no ads for Epic and regular Marvel books. So it just kind of flew over.
And I'm a little bit younger than you, Phil. Direct to consumer. Say what you want about it. It kind of came in clutch sometimes.
And I think it's and I stand behind the eclectic nature of them, and there were just terrific comics and terrific creators. But again, some of that stuff was not what a that time comic audience maybe was looking for, and that's not what we were necessarily. We wanted to sell. The creators wanted to sell. Nobody was trying to do an art house book. Maybe a couple of them were. I don't want anyone to read this. Don't even release it. Don't even publish it. But we certainly wanted it to sell. But you weren't going to get the person who, was fiercely into a elongated man, series to necessarily want to, pick up Moonshadow, right? But I could hand Moonshadow to a person who would say, I would never read a comic book. Comic books are junk. Comic books are, and that person would become a fan of the potential of comics. Now they might be disappointed the next comic they picked up because it wasn't Moonshadow, but there were plenty of entry points with comics. There was a lot of gateway drugs that Epic put out, that could get people to look at a comic book in a different way.
I think a lot of these are just victims of a time. Like Dr. Zero, if he came out 5 years later in the middle, at the height of like the grim and gritty 90s, I think Dr. Zero would have taken off.
Maybe. I mean, I'm always not totally surprised, but it's weird to me that Marvel would never mind those characters a little bit. Like, not necessarily like a relaunch, but, that they didn't
like bring the characters in like he brought Terror
or bring them into 616 and then do nothing with them or, but I mean, it's just kind of weird. Like, it's their properties, but I think a lot of people just don't even think about Epic again. There's a whole cadre of editors who probably never heard of Epic or thought about
that's crazy,
those things.
Like so many great talents came out of that.
Yeah,
even just editorial wise, so many great editors.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, Marie was a very sharp, person, from the moment. But I mean, I'm going to take at least this much credit that we were a good training ground for Marie Javins, and
Yeah, like I said, I'm just.
I do agree. Issue 2, it does kick off like for all the books. Like I feel like you guys got more comfortable with the characters, and you kind of started to like really dig into the world.
It's the origin setup is always a little tricky, like with the first issue. But again, we could have done possibly a better job. But I think the Clerk, Henry Clerk being the foil, for Zero that we introduced, early on, and in that second issue, Shrek, being the second issue of St. George, having a good foil is always a great way to get into a story, better.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know why you're beating yourself up about you love beating yourself up, but I mean, number one, you could have laid everything out like ABC, but it's like I think there was kind of a mystery to it, whereas like after I read 1, I was like, oh, I'm cracking open 2 because I need to see where this is going. Yeah,
and I'm not going to be too severe on me. You've softened me to that, but just critically, like I think all the pieces, I know all the pieces are there, but it would be like the jump between scenes, especially as he's setting himself up, right? And the fashion, when he visits the design firm, right? And they're kind of like, he's doing this compartmentalized thing, right? Where he's got everybody working on something. People are doing what's going to be this ad campaign. These people are influencing things over here. These people are designing certain fabrics that are going to appeal to the public more.
And then giving them the old Jedi, I was never here.
Yeah, but also like, you're doing it and you don't know why you're doing it, but I'm going to bring all the pieces together and suddenly I'm going to be this hyper influential figure. There could have been just a little bit more of that, or there could have been probably like a 1-page scene, after we did all those fragmented things, or maybe it comes before the fragmented things where, you sort of see like a spread, like I've got all these things in operation just to connect the dots for the reader a little bit, especially with a new character and a situation that, well, wait a minute, what is he? Is he a Magneto figure? Is he an anti-hero figure? To just not simplify it, but just guide the reader a little bit more. But it's all there. But it's like we were so into you're being influenced by the things that you want to be, and we weren't quite there yet. And we would become better at it, like as early as issue 2. But that was also again helped by introducing strong antagonists and then putting him right through the ringer. And Henry Clerk.
The international location really opens up the world. Like we're not stagnant just in like Marvel's New York all the time. I love that.
Right.
Everywhere.
Yep. No, that was
all these different.
Yeah, he had that global reach, and he could do that, and then we got to play off that, quite quickly. And in typical way, I would introduce Henry Clerk, who was the Edward Teller, sort of figure, and we would then get rid of him by issue 3, but fortunately then we got to bring him back and in the critical mass thing, and he would become actually a useful a useful foil.
I mean, would you want them to? I'm sure you want them to bring him. You would be happy if they brought him over to 616, but like maybe like introduce him with like a big Marvel event because I love doing events. Maybe like the heroes of the Marvel universe trying to stop him because he's not a cut and dried villain, but it's like, oh, hey, I'm here to save the world. But how do I save the world? Well, I have to run the world.
With a hydrogen bomb, of course.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a different scale, right? When you look at the I mean, as big as his scale was, within the course of that, I think you could take any idle Sunday on a Marvel level, when Doom and Mr. Sinister and Magneto and when they get together for lunch or in the sauna or whatever it is they do to sort of, it's a whole other level of stuff. Not that character couldn't rise to that level, but I'm not sure, what he would satisfy, up against those, things in that way. And, I haven't gone back and reread Critical Mass like in a long time, and maybe at some point we get to that or go through that issue.
Oh, yeah, we'll get there.
It's fairly big, but I always felt, or at least, I felt like we sort of took it to like we got to finish it. They let us finish it, or Archie let us finish it. Like, the books hadn't done well. The fact that they had then greenlit a maxi series of that size, afterwards, was shocking, in a way. But, we really did get to wrap up that series. I mean, everyone's not dead at the end of it. Everyone doesn't go to, some of them are, but, we don't all go to like separate corners and like, but there's also no like hanging thing of it felt like if the movie ended there, which it sort of did, that it was in a good place. It was in a satisfying feeling for these characters to imagine that there are things that continue with them. Yes. But that we were able to like, do a very satisfying end to the story. It didn't get totally shortchanged. So if they did bring something back, that'd be fun to explore what's going on or look at it with different sensibilities, or how would a manipulator like Zero keep up with the manipulations of Tristan 426, a perfume influencer on YouTube, it's, he'd probably be well behind, like the ability of like somebody on TikTok. How would he keep up?
Oh yeah, because he is an old man. I mean, it's basically he was one of the first ones to crawl out of the ocean at the dawn of time. So
right. So but I mean, that would be basically, there'd be like a whole, I don't know, network of influencers, of Zero influencers, and a giant like Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse, like in different parts across the world. Just constantly pumping out posts and TikTok videos and whatever else to keep his profile up and moving around.
Don't put that in the atmosphere. Marvel, their next big event. Who's the villain? Social media influencer.
Exactly.
I mean, they wouldn't be.
That's out, Lilith Hellfire.
Fight me. I don't care. One of my favorite things. I'll just put.
Oh yeah, I did see that. I was about to say something about that. Yeah,
I think Steve. I think Steve illustrated that. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, because I think
I love his editorials across the books too.
Yeah. Steve was under pressure. Fun. Steve was under a lot of pressure, and I do not envy him. But like I said, he rose to the occasion, and definitely, I know he grew as well as the rest of us. Margaret and I were, growing as writers, and I mean, I think this was a great chance for him to, step up or have to step up and take on a lot of things at once. 3 books at once, a shared universe. Again, that sort of, we weren't lording stuff over him. Like, we're your bosses. You can't tell us that. But there's just still a strange dynamic, in that way. And, but, he gave us what for, as they say, to course correct certain stories, or think about certain things and bring certain things around, and I think ultimately the results are better for it.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the personal touches a lot of like modern comics have lost. Like, you have like the like those editorials, like Steve did it here. I know Denny O'Neil used to do them, and it's like, and some comics still do letters pages, but I think they're in the minority. I think they've lost that personal touch. These days it's mostly just, here's your story, there you go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how,
Or is it just because they're working everyone to death these days?
I think there's a lot. I think there's some of that. I mean, I get the sense that they're overworked and understaffed, and it's hard to kind of then.
Huge change in the last year. More corporate, less creatives are actually in control. It's like for me, I work in team, but like marketing, sales, and legal still run everything.
Right.
It's like, babes, if you don't have customers,
right,
your
exactly.
technology infrastructure doesn't work. Hello.
Exactly. It's like
so it's a lot of that in every single corporation.
If you ever watched, did you guys ever watch that series Mad Men? The one about the advertising things. I'm always reminded that there's a scene where, that the main advertising group, has merged or been taken over by another group, and they appoint a guy as president, and he gives a speech about to make money we need more media. To do media we need more time. He just goes through this whole litany of. And finally, the main character, says something like, "Well, I don't think I heard the word client once in all that." It's the point of the advertising to serve the client, and it's that sort of thing. But I not being on the inside in that way, I don't know, how they do it. And certainly there has to be a certain personality type to also want to bring that stuff forward. Even back in the 80s and 90s, some books would have more character. Grunwald's books would have more character, and, Mark Grunwald would show up and his voice or whatever would show up because Mark Grunwald had more character. Larry Hama has a lot of character.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But I don't know that he came through in that same way. Like his character was probably more influenced by just his, the rigor and the strength of, the books under his editorial influence. Archie certainly came through because Archie would do his Archie-torials and everything else. The little Archie, illustrations, which we were constantly trying to drag out of him. Archie, the book goes to the printer tomorrow. I need your cartoon. That's what we should have added. A drawer full of inventory Archie-torials.
What do you mean you're not? What do you mean you're not in it? You wrote that successful Daredevil Black Armor series. The trade is out now. Right. Pick it up.
We did do the fun things on the inside covers, though. I remember, we had the sort of the little weird, I don't know what you'd even call them. I think there was a TV guide entry about a Dr. Zero.
Oh yeah, there was one about it was like a Dr. Zero movie or something.
Yeah. So
I did catch that. Yeah, because if you look at the credits, I think you even have James Bond in there, played by Sean Connery. Which
yeah. There's all sorts of funky, fun little stuff we did with those, and those were a little different things to try to bring a quality of a bigger world, to them.
I saw the James Bond reference. I know. I'm like, I know who wrote that. I know.
Oh yeah,
I
think I wrote them
that.
all.
So, was there a quality as you were developing the character, or a quirk or something like that you're that you weren't expecting, and it just kind of the story unfolded, and you're like, well, I guess that is what it is.
How do you mean? What do you mean?
Did the character change in any way? Like you thought maybe the character's going to end up one way, and then it ended up another way, or?
Well, the whole St. George and the Dragon thing wasn't part of Archie's proposal, initially. I'm not sure he was too crazy about us ultimately going in that direction. But again, I didn't have enough conversations with him around it specifically, which I should have. But as we were going along, Margaret and myself, and thinking it through, well, the legend of St. George and the Dragon, who's the dragon, right? And that's where the whole thing of Zero's the dragon, sort of came up. And then that sort of invested the bigger idea that the Order of St. George was a more combatant, relationship, with Zero over the years, which unfortunately, again, pushed, that became really interesting for us. We dove deep into that, we started to build on that a lot more, which unfortunately, again, sort of pushed Powerline to the side. Powerline became these kind of hanger-ons a little bit because they weren't part of that circle, back and forth. And we should have been stronger about doing that. By the time we got to Critical Mass, we found a good way to pull them back in, and we didn't sideline them, as we had, I think in discovering that relationship. So that was something that we weren't really, seeing. And that's where, Shrek didn't exist. Shrek wasn't, the in service to Zero, as he would sort of become. None of that was part of anything early on. So you discover those things as you kind of go along, and you start to enjoy the characters. And then you say, well, how do these relationships work? And Zero's been around forever. I mean, if Terror, Shrek seems like he's been around forever, but no, Zero's really been around forever. Then, there could have been a cool scene or something where, where was that first meeting along the way?
So was there, I'm trying to remember if you mentioned this before, were there any talks? Did you have to talk to anyone when you brought Shrek over as Terror, or were you just like, no, I always loved this character, I'm just going to throw him in the, like, Daredevil, always going to get his own series over here?
No, I think we touched on that, or, but that was a Marvel driven thing at one point, where they were thinking of doing a line of horror books, and that some Carl Potts, had said, hey, Terror, Shrek could be our Crypt Keeper. And then that was where we started to think about it. And then that fell apart, probably because of the Midnight Suns, as that started to be developed. They said, no, we've got to solve for the horror characters. And I thought that was the end of that. But then Carl was like, no, we've done a lot of thinking about this. Let's just give him his own mercenary, book. And then he became standalone. And I think, as we talked about before, that was never acknowledged. That was never disacknowledged by me, at least. But we never did like a moment of, oh, I wonder what's behind this door. Oh, it's a portal. Oh, look, I'm in another world and I can't get back. So there was nothing. We just ran with him as if he'd always been there.
That's right, kids. Terror was the original mark with a mouth. Everyone's mouth.
Exactly.
All right.
I can't wait to dig into it more, because, like I said, it gets a little more complicated in the best kind of way in the next couple of.
Yeah, I mean, there's It's
intricate. I shouldn't say complicated. It's intricate.
No, it's intricate. It does its thing, and again, I think and maybe it wasn't the right thing to set up like such a strong foil by the second issue, but the Henry Clerk character, was like, to me, was a really strong. Villain, for Zero, he's outwitting him like so quickly, and then Zero having to turn around and, come back at him, I think set up a lot of the manipulative qualities of Zero very well. And, where he would, yes, save the world, but it was only because he had sights, set so directly on this character, and what he could potentially do. Not really caring about the world so much, but because it wasn't part of his, Zero's plans.
Yeah, well, I do hear Zero's making a comeback. He's running for, he's going to be the Republican nominee.
Don't you do it!
I'd vote for Zero.
Yeah, yeah. Well, these days, yeah, I would vote for Zero.
A lot more fit. He looks like, he's got a good look to him.
I just want to say, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Because as I was reading it, literally, like, the nuclear sub was pulling up the cube, and I'm just like, and then they started doing like all the flyover, just like, oh god.
Totally.
All right. Well, should we let
We're
this?
always on the brink of blowing ourselves up.
Never goes out of style. Should we let this man go and collapse, Lilith?
Absolutely.
Well, guys, thank you very much. Yeah, if you want to return to this more, I mean,
we're gonna get the more epic stuff eventually.
And,
yeah. No, you hooked me with Zero.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good stuff kind of going on, in it. But thank you for the chance to revisit it, and again, we'll look for the Dr. Zero Funko in another alternate universe, or maybe somebody will create one. But I saw somebody created a Terror action figure one time. It was pretty messy, but I applauded the efforts,
But yeah, next time I figure maybe we'll cover Night Stalkers #1, because Blade and vampires are big over at Marvel at the moment. So
yeah, what is the problem? I mean, we can talk about this next time. I don't get the problem where they can't figure out how to write a Blade movie. It's like there's just they keep it seems.
I think they want to wait to see how well the Deadpool movie does for rated R, because I feel like Blade has to be.
Maybe. I mean, maybe, but and I'm sure the Wesley one wasn't it? It was probably rated, but I mean that's your proto thing. It was a great movie in its day, and not that you're going to remake that movie, but it's there's lots of great
Blade stories, but you have to have somebody that has an affinity for too.
Yes, but it just doesn't seem
not
like
just a vampire or a daywalker. It's a lot of.
Right. And I think they have to overcome I guess they have to get the right glitter effect on blades. Sort of.
I don't want green blood like Morbius. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
I refuse and reject that.
It's Blade in time.
You think
maybe they'll combine? They're trying to clear the rights with Sony so they can get Morbius and Madam Web into the Blade movie. But we'll see. Yeah, Blade. That was. There's a lot to talk about with Night Stalkers in a good way, in a comical way too. But nobody smiles in that book, I think, ever. If you can find me one panel where anybody smiles,
maybe Ghost Rider. It looks like he's smiling, but
yeah. All right, folks. Very good. Enjoy your Saturday.
Thank you too, sir.
All right. Thanks again. Talk soon. Bye. If I can find the button. There it is.
All right, kids.
Hello.
The great DG Chichester. All right, and. If you want to send in your questions for Mr. Chichester, any suggestions on what books you want us to cover, or
Or don't forget to subscribe to his Substack.
Yes, and he is making con appearances. He's in Hershey at the end of June. What did he say?
He said GalaxyCon.
GalaxyCon, yeah. Dragon Con eventually, yeah. So he's gonna be all over the place. But yes, send us your thoughts, send us your suggestions. CapesandLunatics@gmail.com or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And again, you have no excuse for not doing this, kids. I put the graphic up on YouTube. And remember, you can find all our episodes, social media, merchandise, the brand new merch. Pick it up. And of course, Cash App link, our Patreon. It's all at tubespace.io/CapesandLunatics Podcast Network. It's tubespace.io/CapesandLunatics Podcast Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube, yep, right there, patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Takes you right to the Patreon. All right, Lilith.
No, we'll let the people get out,
All right, kids. So yes, thank you again, Mr. Chichester. Again, he was about to ready to collapse. So yes, thank you, and come back next month for Night Stalkers #1.
And no, we're not talking about my exes.